Hello everybody, this is Tip Top MTG here today with another Magic the Gathering video. In today's video, we are going to be looking at Kaldheim and all of the spoilers that have come out today being January 7th. So yeah, this is what I'm going to do every day for about the next 2 weeks, where I'm going to look at every spoiler that came out, give you my thoughts and opinions on them, and just talk about what they may mean for the mostly standard, historic, and somewhat Commander meta. Maybe not so much meta with Commander, but those are the three formats I'm really going to be looking at, but I may mention others along the way as well. Why don't we just jump into it? There are a decent amount of cards today. Starting off, we have Sigrid, God Favored. It's a 3-cost white legendary creature, human warrior, 2/2 with flash, first strike, and protection from god creatures. This one was actually leaked, and I did a video covering it yesterday, but I am going to talk about it once again. When it enters the battlefield, exile up to one target attacking or blocking creature until Sigrid leaves the battlefield. It's very interesting in the fact that it is a combat trick that exiles your opponent's creatures, but it's also a creature, so it can kind of deal with 2 creatures at once, and because of that, I think it's pretty good. On top of that, protection from gods may be a nice sideboard card if a deck with a god becomes a meta thing. Next we have Behold the Multiverse. It's a 4-cost blue instant, and it says scry 2, then draw 2 cards, but it has foretell for 1 and a blue. Now here's how this is going to work. I'm going to explain each mechanic one time during this video, and then in the future I may just briefly explain them. I'm not going to go nearly as in-depth. If you want an even more in-depth description, more than what I'm going to say now, check out my video I did earlier today where I talked about all of the mechanics of the set. That might help you understand some of them. So foretell, essentially you can pay 2 generic mana and exile it face down, but you can only do this on your turn. Now you can do it at instant speed on your turn, but just not on an opponent's turn. Then, at any time that you could cast the spell normally, you can pay its foretell cost to cast it. So, for instance, with Behold the Multiverse here, I could on turn 2 pay 2 to exile it face down, and then turn 3 pay 2 and scry 2 and draw 2 cards. So you're kind of splitting the cost over 2 turns instead of doing it for 1. This is useful for splitting the mana cost, but it's also useful for things like instants, where you may have, say your deck is all about drawing your second card each turn. Leaving 4 mana up is a lot, but leaving 2 mana up is a lot less. And so foretelling it like on an early turn and then having 2 mana up as an instant speed reaction is a lot better. So like if a counter spell normally costs 4, but you can foretell it for 2, then pay 2 to cast it, that's really good. Another good one was there was a leaked one, and I'm not going to say exactly what the card does, but essentially it's like a reactional one. It's like based on the number of creatures do something, that your number of creatures that died. And so you're not going to know when you need to cast that, but you probably want it to be cheap so that you can cast it effectively, and foretell kind of lets you do that. It's kind of like the morph of spells. Either way, in terms of this card specifically, I think if you're running a full foretell deck, this could definitely be a contender. Looking 4 cards deep is pretty good, and the fact that you can technically do this turn 3 is good. I might run it in I need to draw my second card each turn, but 4 mana is a decent amount, so I feel like this is mostly here for limited and foretell decks. One thing I do want to say, I really like foretell because it's a mechanic that can probably have a whole deck built around it. You'll actually see one card in these spoilers that kind of encourages that, but it also can just be in a deck randomly. Like if this card is in your deck, it's fine. It's not going to not do anything. Whereas some mechanics, I'm not going to say mutate is exactly like this, but mutate's a good example where like, if you pretty much want to build more mutate decks, you want to build a mutate deck because a lot of cards say when this mutates. You want to be able to do it. That's not true of all things, but you don't just throw a random mutate card into a deck very often, except for maybe Gem Racer. So yeah, this mechanic is very versatile in that way. Next we have Augury Raven, another one with foretell. It's a 4-cost blue creature bird with flying, and it has foretell, 1 and a blue. Again, you can pay 2, exile it face down, and play it later. I don't exactly understand this one other than getting a 3/3 flyer for not 3 mana, but for 4 mana on turn 3. I guess that's not awful. Blue doesn't get like super nice creatures, so this one isn't awful, but I feel like foretell works the best with instant, so I'm not a huge fan of this card necessarily. It's just not interesting, but again, for a limited or a foretell deck, maybe you'd play it depending on the amount of support it gets. Next we have Glimpse the Cosmos. It's a 2-cost blue sorcery, and it says, look at the top 3 cards of your library. Put one of them into your hand and the rest on the bottom of your library in any order. So it's an anticipate kind of effect where you're looking at the top 3, picking one. But it says, as long as you control a giant, you may cast Glimpse the Cosmos from your graveyard by paying blue rather than paying its mana cost. If it would be put into your graveyard, exile it instead. So you can cast it once, and then later on, when you cast your giant, you can then recast this. This is actually a pretty good card. Not only is it cantripping, it theoretically then draws you a card later. You are kind of drawing 2 cards for 3 mana, split over 2 turns at least, but you do need a giant in order to get this effect off. So I think, I don't think like a deck that's necessarily built around giants is going to happen. I could see putting this in a deck that Bone Crusher Giant is in. If you're like an maybe combo deck, maybe you have Bone Crusher Giant, which is a nice removal spell, and then you cast the Stomp, and then you cast Bone Crusher Giant, then you cast this, then you can cast it again. So maybe in an instant and sorcery deck, this could fit in as just kind of a slightly worse anticipate because of the sorcery speed, but then you can recast it later with a few cards in your deck. So I think this actually has some potential. Next we have Igna, Rune Eyes. It's a 4-cost blue legendary creature, human wizard, 3/3, and when it enters the battlefield, scry 3. Meh, I mean, like, that's nice, but as an effect, it's just not something that I go, woo! When it dies, draw 3 cards if 3 or more creatures died this turn. So it's going to protect you from board wipes. Honestly, I wish this had flash. If this had flash, I would say, oh, this is kind of an interesting commander. You're disincentivizing your opponents to board wipe, and it would be a weird commander because it would be one of those ones where, you know, you have your creatures out, and then you're like flashing this in order to be killed. And I think having that option is interesting. Maybe it's not the right play, but I think giving this thing flash would not have been that ridiculous. It is a wizard, so that boosts up party, but I'm just not a big fan of this. This isn't something that makes me go, ooh, that seems fun to build a commander deck around, or even, ooh, I want to put this in my deck. I mean, maybe you put this in some sort of weird sacrifice deck that also runs blue, but probably not. Next we have alrund's Epiphany. It's a 7-cost blue sorcery, and it says create 2 1/1 bird creature tokens with flying. Take an extra turn after this one, exile it. Okay, so they thought a 7-cost should say take an extra turn, shuffle this card into your library. Luckily, this one is not another Nexus of Fate. One of the big problems with that is that you could keep looping it. And if you're drawing enough cards, there was a high chance for you just keep taking extra turns. This one's a one and done unless you, of course, do the Thassa mixed with Scholar of the Ages mixed with Narset's Reversal. Then this card is not infinite. This card does go infinite, but obviously outside of that really janky combination, this is just going to be a one-time extra turn. But what makes it interesting is that it has Foretell. Now, you might be thinking, why would I pay 7 or 8 mana for an effect that costs 7? So how it works is, you know, the more something costs, the harder it is to get to that mana cost. Getting to 3 mana is a lot easier than getting to 4, and getting to 4 is much easier than 5. Partially because you start with 7 cards, then you have maybe 3 lands there, so you're kind of already guaranteed to get to 3, and then 1 and 3 of your draws are going to be lands, so yeah, this could definitely be a thing. You get 2 blue birds, which will then be able to attack the next turn. I don't really think that's a huge part of the spell. I think it'll be played as one of the only extra turn spells in Standard. The only other one is, and it's not really an extra turn spell, it's a discontinuity. So yeah, if anyone's looking for a flashy big effect, you know, you can put this in here. My Joda deck is gonna like this spell, just as an extra turn spell. So yeah. Next we have Alrund, God of the Cosmos, and then he's a modal double-face card with Haka, Whispering Raven on the back. So Alrund is a legendary creature god 1/1. So he is a god. He's a 5-cost 1/1, but he gets +1/+1 for each card in your hand and each foretold card you own in exile. So if you play him into an empty board, he's a 1/1. And what's interesting about the gods in Kaldheim is that they are not indestructible or have some sort of recursion feature. They just can die. But then it says at the beginning of your end step, choose a card type, then reveal the top 2 cards of your library. Put all cards of the chosen type into your hand and the rest on the bottom of your library in any order. That is crazy. I mean, if you're running this in, if you name land, you know, maybe you don't with name land, but like, If you're running this in a deck that runs like a lot of creatures or a lot of one specific type of permanent, this could be pretty good. I mean, I could see myself running this in an instant and sorcery deck. You name instant, although it's a little hard having both of them. You name instant, maybe you're drawing 2 cards at your end step, and now you're outdrawing your opponent 3-1. Now, what does that do? That then boosts him up, so I could totally see this getting out of hand very quickly. Then we have Haka, Whispering Raven. It's a 2-cost blue legendary creature bird, 2/3 with flying, and whenever it deals combat damage to a player, return it to its owner's hand, then scry 2. So it's cool. What you can do here, now it is a kind of an expensive play. You play Haka on 1 turn. Actually, that's not that expensive. And then next turn you swing with Haka, not Haka. You swing with it, deal combat damage, you return it to your hand, scry 2. Now you know what the top 2 cards of your library are. You then play alrund because Haka returned itself to your hand, and then at your end step you can name whatever type or whatever card you want essentially to get. Now, this modal double face card kind of plays with the fact that it's a modal double face card. We really haven't seen that. Most cards are kind of just like, yeah, I have 2 sides, they don't really interact. But this one says, hey, if you can't cast Alrund, play the other side. The other side will help when you want to cast Alrund in the future and will actually let you replay him. So I actually think this is a really interesting design where it's playing with the fact that you can play either side. You could just drop Alrund right onto the battlefield, or you could kind of prep the field with Haka a little bit. So yeah, I definitely like the design of this card. I don't think it's overly crazy in any way. Next we have Vargoth, Blood Sky Sire. It's a 3-cost black legendary creature, demon rogue, 2/3 with death touch, and it has boast, which this is the first time we're seeing this. It is essentially an ability that can only be activated if this creature has attacked, and you can only activate it once per turn. So for instance, Vargoth cannot just pay 2 mana to do this ability. He has to have attacked or be attacking to activate it. But the ability is target player searches their library for a card, then shuffles their library and puts that card on top. Now, there are a couple interesting things about this card. First off, that is a very insane effect to be able to repeatedly do. Why? Because yes, it's putting it on top, but let's say you give Vargoth the ability to not be blocked. So now he can attack every turn, or maybe even better, just give him indestructible. Hard to remove. He can swing every turn. He has death touch, so he's already, not wanting to be blocked. And then you can just fix your draws. You might be thinking, oh, how are you going to get this card that makes him indestructible consistently? I wonder if he has a tutor on him. So you tutor for the card to make you be able to repeatedly do this without interruption. And now the game has essentially become, you have 2 less lands than it really looks like, and you top deck the perfect thing every turn. Oh, you need a land? Well, you got it. You need this specific card? You got it. This card is utterly insane. I'm expecting it to be a lot bigger in Commander, especially for the fact that it's not just you. You can make someone else search their library. And you know what? We got a card that works perfectly with this. Opposition Agent from Commander Legends. This does not say target player may search their library. No. They have to, which means if you have Opposition Agent out, and I know this is just a little bit of a thing, you can search their library for any card for 2 mana every turn. You can just get any card. Opposition Agent kind of steals their tutor. So very, very crazy card. In Standard, I think that it's a little too control-y to have this work, because you do have to play this, have it survive a turn around the table, then it has to swing, you have to have the mana to do it, and then you have to get all the way back around the table, swing again in order to activate this more than once, and if you don't activate this more than once, you might as well have just cast Grim Tutor. So, I don't know how crazy it'll be in Standard, but I think in Commander, especially since this is a legendary creature, this will be kind of insane. Next we have Blood on the Snow. This one is a leak, so if you don't want to know, just don't look, or don't listen, or mute, or leave the video. I don't know. It's a leak. It's a 6-cost black snow sorcery. Choose 1, destroy all creatures, or destroy all planeswalkers. That is a nice thing to get. I mean, I don't remember the last time black kind of got just a destroy all creatures. So it's nice to see that it's here. It's also a snow sorcery, but it also can destroy all planeswalkers. I feel like most people are putting this in their deck for creatures, but I guess that could be kind of nice. Then it says, then return a creature or planeswalker card with converted mana cost X or less from your graveyard to the battlefield, where X is the amount of snow mana spent to cast it. Now, in a mono black deck, this card I think is going to be played. Why? Because yes, it is expensive, but in a mono black deck, first off, you don't really care if things go to the graveyard necessarily, but also, if you're in a mono-colored black deck, you can probably get away with most of your lands being snow lands, which means you're going to board wipe and then return something with CMC probably 5. You probably have like a castle out, so CMC 5 or less just back onto the battlefield, and that thing that goes back on the battlefield may be able to return other things to the battlefield, or, you know, could be, if we're talking about historic, Phyrexian Obliterator. So I definitely think this card will see play, especially being one of the only black board wipes in standard / historic that just say destroy all creatures and don't make your land stay tapped or whatever. So I definitely think this will see play. I like the card. The issue with it being mono black though is that with snow basics being here, it may become very, very easy. I expect a lot of people to use snow basics. Yeah. I'm honestly surprised, by the way, that they didn't do special art for snow basics, because I thought they would try and push that on MTG Arena, because people have these fancy art basics, so they don't buy more fancy art basics. But now you need snow basics. So I'm surprised they didn't do like full art snow basics or something that you had to buy. But whatever. Next we have Frostbite. It's a 1-cost red snow instant, and it deals 2 damage to target creature or planeswalker. So a slightly worse shock. But if you control 3 or more snow permanents, it deals 3 damage instead. So I could definitely see this going in like a red deck. Again, mono red could definitely swap out all of its mountains for snow mountains. There's like no downside to doing that. And essentially this just turns into a better shock, except it can't hit people in the face, which is definitely a relevant thing. But if your deck is not planning on killing people with a shock, I could definitely see people running this. I don't think it'll be like the first choice, but I think if you've exhausted your other choices, this could definitely see some fit. Especially saying it can be a lightning bolt towards creatures and planeswalkers. And if it's not, maybe it's a sideboarded in card against planeswalker heavy decks, if that becomes a thing. So who knows? Next we have Masked Vandal. It's a 2-cost green creature shapeshifter, 1/3 with changeling. Now, before we read any more of this card, I am incredibly surprised that they are putting this many shapeshifters at this low mana cost. Now, I say this many. We've only seen 2. One of them was like, I believe, a 3-drop. But here's the thing. I very easily could see a deck that uses the party payoff cards that does not run any individual warriors or anything besides the payoffs, and the rest of it is just changelings. I do not see a deck that uses changelings ever appearing without it using party, because basically party, they've taken party and said, oh, you need to, get these 4 very specific creatures, and turned it into get 4 changelings out. And so I definitely, if a changeling deck forms, be expecting at least 1 party payoff in it. So I'm just surprised they are doing them this cheap, or like this way. I may have done it a little bit differently, and maybe this is why green, I believe, was not one of the colors of the party. Let me think. Yeah. I don't believe green was one of the colors of the party. Maybe that's because they knew changelings were coming and whatever, so they wanted to make it so that if you were running, changelings, you're gonna have to add an extra color. But I don't know how I feel about this, especially after coming off a party. I think it'll definitely boost it up, and party definitely is not a powerful mechanic, but will this push it into the meta? Probably not, but it will make it a little more powerful. So maybe that's a good thing. Maybe now party can actually see some play. Either way, then it says, when it enters the battlefield, you may exile a creature card from your graveyard. If you do, exile target artifact or enchantment an opponent controls. I am kind of torn by this card. I mean, okay, so yes, so let's take Naturalize. Destroy target artifact or enchantment. This card, on its face, seems pretty good. The issue is if you don't have a creature in your graveyard. So if you're in like Golgari and you're milling yourself, this is going to replace like a Naturalize if we're talking about Commander or some green spell. Because not only is it you're getting a 1/3 along with your Naturalize is actually exiling, which can get rid of like indestructible gods, for instance. So yeah, I think this is a pretty good card, and if you can guarantee there are creatures in your graveyard, this seems pretty good. Next we have Saruf's Packmate. It's a 4-cost green creature wolf, 3/3. Yay, wolves. Wolves is like one of my favorite tribes in like historic right now. When it enters the battlefield, draw a card, and then you can foretell it for 2. So yeah, I mean, get it a little bit earlier out. Again, this just feels like a generic foretell card that is just there for limited purposes. Next, we have Old Growth Troll. It's a 3-cost green creature troll warrior, 4/4 with trample. So it's a 4/4 for 3, but it triple green 3. And then when it dies, if it was a creature, return it to the battlefield. It's an aura enchantment with enchant forest you control, and enchanted forest has tap, add green, and pay 1, tap, sacrifice this land, create a tap 4/4 green troll creature token with trample. Okay, let me break this down for you. Essentially, they said, oh, trolls, they rest for a long time, and so they rest so long that things start to grow on them, and they become part of the land. So the idea here is that it becomes a 4/4, and when it dies or goes to sleep, for instance, it comes back as the land, and the land kind of covers over it, so it enchants a land. And now, because the troll's there, the land's gonna tap for more mana. But you can also wake up the troll and then destroys the land when he stands up, and then you get your 4/4 back. So yeah. He kind of starts as a 4/4, kind of turns into a land for a little bit, and then wakes back up. Is kind of the idea of this card. I like the concept. I just don't think green needed another like 4/4 for 3 that then also ramps them and then comes back later. That seems a little unnecessary, but whatever. Green seems to get lots of good cards. Next, we get Elvish Warmaster. It's a 2-cost green creature elf warrior. Whenever one or more elves enter the battlefield under your control, create a 1/1 green elf warrior creature token. This ability triggers only once each turn. So, essentially, the first elf that enters the battlefield triggers this, and you get a 1/1. So as long as you're playing 1 elf per turn, you get a 1/1. It does not say it's non-token, which is why it says this ability triggers only once each turn. So if you have some way to make token elves, this still triggers, which is kind of an interesting effect. Normally, it just limits it to non-tokens. Then we have 7. You can pay 7, and elves you control get +2/+2 and gain Death Touch. So you're gonna kind of pump up all your elves, give them Death Touch. I would say that's a lot of mana, but elves can normally generate like 50 million, and this is giving them a mana sink that will just instantly kill your opponent. So yeah, this is probably going in like historic elf decks, at least a little bit. Yeah, pretty good. Also, I think he triggers himself when he enters the battlefield, so it's a 2/2 and a 1/1, but I'm not sure because it says 1 or more. Oh no, it says other. I'm just completely blind. So he doesn't trigger himself. But yeah, it's definitely an interesting card, especially with the fact that tokens can kind of trigger that first ability. Next, we have Voranclex, Monstrous Raider. So this was leaked a little while ago, and they revealed it. So it's a 6-cost green legendary creature, Phyrexian Praetor, 6/6 with Trample and Haste. So a 6/6 for 6 with Trample and Haste. Pretty crazy. But if you would put 1 or more counters on a permanent or player, put twice that many. And if an opponent would put permanent counters on a permanent or player, put half that many rounded down. So while this is out, if your opponent puts 1 counter on something, they actually put 0, which a lot of things work in increments of 1. So I could definitely see this in like a mono green deck being a sideboarded in card. It also works well in any deck that puts counters on its own thing and things. And of course, it is also good with Infect because you're going to double your Infect. Either way, it's a Phyrexian, which is why a lot of people are excited about it. Now, they also revealed an alternate version where they have like a different frame, and also everything is written in Phyrexian, which is also going to be on Arena. Yep, pretty cool. I know a lot of people are excited about it. It doesn't really do much for me, but like, I'm just happy when everyone else is happy, and I'm interested to see why the Praetors and the Phyrexians may be on Kaldheim. Next, we have Cole the Forge Master. It's a 2-cost red and white legendary creature dwarf warrior, uncommon, 2/2, and whenever another non-token creature you control dies, if it was enchanted or equipped, return it to its owner's hand. So that's pretty cool. It makes it so maybe those 2-for-1s where you like enchant one of your creatures and then it dies, it's not a 2-for-1 necessarily. Yes, you do need to replay it, but you don't lose the card. And then creature tokens that you control that are enchanted or equipped get +1/+1. Now that's something that I don't necessarily agree with. These two things kind of interrupt each other. He's saying, I'm going to protect the non-tokens, but then I'm going to boost the tokens. And I guess the idea is he sends them in, but if I have an enchantment and I have a 1/1 and I have a 1/1 token, I'm putting it on the 1/1. That way, if my opponent bounces it, for instance, I'm not losing 2 cards, I'm only losing 1. So, yeah, I'm not a huge fan of that part, but I do like the top part, definitely. I like the whole bounce it thing. It almost lets you maybe even do some manipulation. If you have something that can equip for 0, and then you have like if you can like kill your creature and then replay it, maybe you can get some sort of value engine going there, maybe not in standard, but outside of that, I think it could be really cool. Next, we have Invasion of the Giants. This is a 2-cost blue and red saga, and its first stage says scry 2, so you're paying 2 to scry 2. And then you draw a card, then you may reveal a giant card from your hand. When you do, it deals 2 damage to target opponent or planeswalker. And then the next giant spell you cast this turn costs 2 less to cast. So you're going to scry 2, prepping your next turn. Then you're going to draw a card. Hopefully you drew a giant, because at this point you've looked at least 3 cards into your library. Then you're going to deal 2 damage. And then the next turn, that giant that you drew the previous turn, you get to cast. So it's kind of delayed casting a giant. This doesn't seem awful if you play this on turn 2, because it's very hard to cast this turn 1. Turn 3, you're drawing the card. Turn 4, you're casting. Assuming you've played a land each turn, you can cast a 6-cost giant on turn 4 with this. I think a giant deck could definitely get away with running this, and I think it could be pretty cool. Next we have Binding the Old Gods. It's a 4-cost black and green enchantment saga, and this one is an uncommon that I think is pretty crazy. It destroys target non-land permanent opponent controls. So first off, it's a saga with removal. Now what I like about this is that there's probably some space for some shenanigans here, maybe not in standard or historic, but the fact that you could theoretically remove the counter and then at your upkeep destroy a non-land permanent, and then if you can consistently remove lore counters from this, like I don't know how, I'd have to look at cards that do that, then you could theoretically just keep destroying non-land permanents each upkeep. Either way, it has other good effects. First, then you can search your library for a forest card, not a basic, a forest card, and put it onto the battlefield tapped, then shuffle your library. So you kill something, you get a land. So at this point, it is, I don't remember the name of the card. There's a card from War of the Spark, black and green, destroy target non-land permanent, something growth maybe, and then you search your library for a basic. But this one doesn't search for a basic, it searches for a forest, which means it could be a dual land, a triome, anything like that. And then creatures you control gain death touch. So yeah, destroying something, ramping, and then making another attack that's going to be pretty big. Honestly, not a bad card. I don't know how much play it'll see, because spending 4 mana for removal that's sorcery speed isn't gonna be a super popular thing. But in something like Brawl or Commander, this seems like a really awesome card. Killing things, destroying an opponent's thing, while also tutoring for a land is a pretty good thing. So I like it. Next we have Nico Iris. It's a X white or blue legendary planeswalker. Nico, 3 loyalty, and when Nico Iris enters the battlefield, create X shard tokens. They're enchantments with so they're enchantments, not artifacts. That's kind of interesting. Normally they are artifact tokens, but they are enchantments with pay 2, sacrifice this enchantment, scry 1, then draw a card. So it's like a clue, except you also get to scry 1, and they're enchantments instead of artifacts. That'll be kind of interesting to see how relevant that is in a deck that cares about when artifacts enter the battlefield. Like a constellation effect mixed with this is pretty crazy. Then, +1, up to 1 target creature you control can't be blocked this turn. Whenever that creature deals damage this turn, return it to its owner's hand. That's pretty cool. So first off, you can make something unblockable and then have it returned to your hand, which, you can do a couple interesting things with this. You could take a creature that, for instance, does a lot of damage but sacrifices at your end step. Those are generally in red, but then you make it unblockable, so now they're just taking a ton of damage, and then you bounce it back to your hand. Or something with a good ETB ability. You could do this, not even attack with, you do need to deal damage. You attack with it, deal the damage, because it can't be blocked anyways, return it to your hand, and then you can redo that every turn. But another awesome thing is modal double-faced cards. If you have, say, a god out, and this god becomes not useful anymore, and you actually want their other side, make them unblockable, swing, return it to your hand, play the other side. So I think modal double-faced cards are a big reason why that +1 is the way it is, and I think it leads to a lot of interesting potential. So far, you'll notice that, outside of maybe Kaya I think is a pretty, not generic planeswalker, but a more traditional planeswalker. You'll notice as we get into another planeswalker here that they are actually a lot more interesting. And I actually did a live stream where I talked about this. But I talked about how giving planeswalkers abilities that aren't necessarily loyalty abilities makes them better, in my opinion. It makes it so that they are not just plus ability, gain card advantage, minus ability, removal, ultimate ability, win. This one is not the same way. Like this one, not only does it have an ETB, but it also doesn't have an ult. So then the -1, it deals 2 damage to target tapped creature for each card you've drawn this turn, which the shard tokens that you made would help with that. Also, it just helps if you can draw cards in other ways. And it's, if you draw like 5 cards, you're dealing 10 damage. Now it is to a creature, and it does have to be a tapped creature, so it's a little specific there, but not bad. And then it's -1, create a shard token. So then you get to create that token we were talking about earlier. Now, on its face, this is a 3-mana walker. Of course, you can pay more, which I think is a very powerful thing. It's not that, oh, it's a 6 cost, and when it ETBs, you create 3 shard tokens. No, if you want to just play this for that +1 ability, you don't have to pay anything into X. And I think that is a really insane thing. One other thing, was there something else I wanted to mention about this card? No, not really. I think it just has a lot of potential. It's not as, cut and dry like Kaya, the Inexorable, who has a +1 that kind of keeps your creatures alive, and then has a minus ability that's removal, then has an ult that kind of just is winning the game. So Kaya is a more traditional planeswalker. Nico over here is a lot more interesting, I feel like, in design, and is played different. And I feel like, planeswalkers can get boring if they're all the same format, but by doing something like this, you get this interesting kind of effect. Next we have Tybalt and Valky. These are a double-faced card, and we'll talk about that here in a second. So Valky, God of Lies, is a 2-cost black legendary creature god, 2/1, and when it enters the battlefield, each opponent reveals their hand. For each opponent, exile a creature card revealed this way until Valky leaves the battlefield. Then you can pay X and choose a creature card exiled with Valky with converted mana cost X. Valky becomes a copy of that card. So he ETBs, and then each opponent kind of takes a you get to take a card from an opponent's hand, and kind of just have Valky become it at any time. Now, the issue here is that once you have it become a copy, it cannot become a copy of something different. It does not say, and it keeps this ability. No, no, no. Once you have it become a copy, it stays that way. Now, he also has another side, and that side is Tybalt, Cosmic Imposter. It is a 7-cost black and red legendary planeswalker Tybalt, and as Tybalt enters the battlefield, you get an emblem with, you may play cards exiled with Tybalt and spend mana as though a mana of any color to cast those spells. Then you can +2M to exile the top card of each player's library, -3M to exile target artifact or creature, and -8M to exile all cards from graveyards, add red, red, red. Now, I'm going to talk about a couple things with this card. The first thing is design. I talked about this with Nico, but this feels like an interesting design. It doesn't just say, like it is a plus ability that gives you card advantage, a minus ability that is removal, and a ultimate that wins you the game. The ultimate winning the game, a little less so, but you do get to play cards from everyone's graveyard. So if you're running this in like a Rakdos middle deck, maybe that would be an insane ult, but it doesn't necessarily win you the game on its own. It's like some ults do, but it is done in an interesting way. He has a passive ability once again, and this kind of interacts and makes his other abilities that could be useful for other reasons really, really cool. The idea of him taking things and exiling them is both on his Valky side and Tybalt. So the idea here is that he pretends to be a god, but in reality he is Tybalt. Now, I like the card design. I think it's an interesting one. It is very similar to why I played Ashiok from Theros. The idea of I'm going to put a bunch of things in exile and then cast them. Now, this is a little bit different. These have to be exiled with Tybalt. But it has that same feeling, and it doesn't require an ultimate to get to. You can just +2, and now you're drawing a card for each player, essentially. And it doesn't say Tybalt has to stay alive. So if you exile, if you're in a commander game, you use this possibility, you get 4 cards exiled. Tybalt can die, and you can still cast those spells because it's an emblem giving you the ability. So I think it's a very, very cool thing. Now, I want to talk a little bit about the design. Do I think Tybalt needed to be a double-sided planeswalker or modal double-face card where you can play either side? No, I don't. I honestly think there's a high chance he was designed the way he is on the back originally and not modal double-face. Mostly, there is a little bit of parody there, but I honestly wouldn't be surprised if both Valky and Tybalt were 2 different cards. And they said, hey, these are similar. Let's make them double-faced. And the idea behind it was that, okay, so in a standard set, they can't print this planeswalker can be your commander, but they can put a legendary creature on the front and then let you play the other side. Because that's how it works. A modal double-face card. If Valky was a creature and behind it was an equipment, you could play the equipment from the command zone. So Tybalt is technically a commander. You could never cast Valky and just use Tybalt as a planeswalker commander. So essentially, we have a new planeswalker commander in a standard product. But it doesn't look like that. People aren't going to necessarily notice that right away. And it doesn't say this can be your commander, which means they're not breaking any of their rules they've put in place. And of course, in Commander, you do also have the option to cast Valky if you need a creature, or if an opponent has something awesome in hand, you can then have Valky kind of steal that. Of course, commander tax does, not apply to them separately. If it did, that would be insane. You'd play Valky until you got up to Tybalt, and then Tybalt. But every time Valky dies, Tybalt gets more expensive as well. But yeah, I think that this was a way to make Tybalt a commander because he does have that vibe of like, I'm gonna steal your stuff and just I'm gonna play what you're playing, which is I feel like a very popular theme in EDH. It's not something you can necessarily do outside of it. So I think it's very popular, so they wanted it to be able to be a commander. I know that's like big speculation there, but I think that's what happened. All right, next we have snow-covered lands. I talked about these a little bit, but here are some of the arts. There are 5 others. Just want to mention the new frame. You can see it both on the bottom and around the edges. And then moving on from there, we have these, which I do want to talk a little bit about. This video has been incredibly long. I didn't realize it. But yeah, these are really cool. So at first I thought they were just snowlands that entered the battlefield tapped for either color, and that's cool. You get double colored tapped snowlands, and that's pretty cool for like multicolor snow decks. But here's the thing. These are not actually, they don't have the ability to tap for either color because it says it. It's because they have the type. And actually this is, I believe they said the first dual lands at common that have both types, which is a big thing for Pauper, I'm sure, but it also is pretty cool for a lot of different reasons. It can be tutored out, and it's just something kind of interesting and unique, and just kind of shows how they're willing to increase the power level. I actually talked about, I think at one point, the fact that I was surprised there was never a land, swamp forest that enters tapped and that's it, and now we kind of have those. Yes, they have snow in them, but you can literally just ignore the snow part. So yeah, I think that these are pretty cool, and I'm glad they exist. They are awesome for like Commander. If you don't maybe have the better lands, this can be a nice little compromise. So yeah. And that is it for spoilers. I do want to mention one other thing. They announced that there were 10 creature types that are like a big part of Kaldheim. I wanted to show those off. So we have dwarves, humans, trolls, demons, spirits, draugrs, shapeshifters, elves, valkyries, and giants. And within humans, there are multiple tribes supposedly. So, yep, these are the tribes that you can kind of expect to get improvements. Draugrs are going to be your zombies and Valkyries are going to be your angels, by the way. Yep. So those are the tribes of Kaldheim and all the cards that were spoiled today. Tomorrow I'll be doing a similar video, hopefully a little bit shorter, where I don't have to explain all the mechanics again and stuff, where I cover all of tomorrow's spoilers. So yeah, if you guys enjoyed and made it all the way through this video, please hit that like button. Also, wow, thank you. Hit the subscribe button, and I will see you guys in the next one. Bye.